big announcements from Microsoft this week with the arrival of ARM-based Windows laptops. Now, obviously, back in the past when the Surface first launched, we had Surface RT based on an ARM version of Windows 8, I believe. And let's just say it wasn't particularly good, but things have moved on. The Qualcomm X Elite is a new processor, SoC, that's, well, they're talking about massive performance gains over Apple's new M4 chip. And, they're also talking about gargantuan battery life. Basically, it's almost as if, well, Satya Nadella has basically said that they're looking to compete on a more even terms with what Apple is doing with Apple Silicon. From our perspective, well, let's just put it this way: it's very AI driven, and I got to say, those features look interesting, but it's not massively compelling from my point of view. What I am curious about is the gaming performance, because what they're doing here is allowing you to run x86 apps on these new laptops by using an emulation layer, which is called Prism. And they're saying it's just as good, if not better, by some degree than the Rosetta emulation that's used by Apple Silicon to run x86 apps. But yeah, I'm just really interested to see what the gaming performance is going to be like. And we've seen Baldur's Gate 3, and I think Borderlands 3 was also shown running at reasonable frame rates. But obviously, you have no idea what the settings are. I think I think Tom Warren mentioned to me that Civilization was also a demo there. John, any thoughts about this?
Yeah, no, it's interesting to see them make the switch. It makes sense in terms of efficiency, battery life. I think it's been tough to compete with what Apple's doing in the laptop space lately, because the silicon is just very efficient and quite performant for what it is. And Intel and AMD and everything are great in the desktop space where you have large power budgets and, you're trying to push a lot of this. But on mobile side, obviously that comes with battery life reductions and other things in effect. And now by digging back in, so Microsoft's tried ARM-based Windows before, right? But it didn't exactly work out.
They were using a Tegra 3, so it wasn't exactly performance.
No, and there wasn't anything like an emulation layer that was any good. No. in effect, nothing like that. So this is really an attempt to bridge that gap and make normal PC apps still usable, including games, on this much more efficient mobile sort of chipset, which could mean very long battery life for laptops, which is great for Windows laptops. So, I mean, they quoted in the 30 FPS range for Baldur's Gate 3, which for an emulation layer on a mobile chipset, that's pretty darn impressive. And
that's insane.
I'd imagine a fair number of games should be quite playable, many at much higher frame rates, in fact. Which is excellent. So that could be useful for the stuff going forward. But you're right, Microsoft focused a lot on the AI side of things, which
there's a lot of controversy there. I think the thing that people are kind of riled up about is the recall feature. Yeah, where basically this is quite remarkable. The system is essentially screenshotting you as you use your PC, and then basically feeding those screenshots into AI, so you can ask the AI about tasks that you've previously done, and then go back and find things easier and all of that kind of business. And I can imagine there's a lot of people out there that do not want background screenshotting happening.
It's basically a keylogger at this point. The thing is, though, is the idea is interesting in that it's essentially designed to do what Windows Search already does, right? Where you type in a thing and it finds the thing quickly. Although Windows Search is still not excellent, I would say. But this takes it further by allowing you to search more contextually. Like if you remembered a part of a document or image or something that you may have looked at, you're like, oh gee, I don't know what the file name is. You can type in a descriptor and it should be able to find it, is what they're promising. But and I almost wonder if part of the problem stems from the way they talked about it, it's good that they were open about what it is, but the way they phrased it and the way they talked about it made it sound pretty bad in terms of like privacy. Like, yeah, they tried to reiterate it doesn't send anything to Microsoft yet, but there's no plans to send data. I'm just saying, when you're capturing all that data, it just feels like if something goes wrong, something changes, it's not good. That's not necessarily good. That's not what people want. People do not want more intrusion into their OS lifestyle. But thankfully, at least for now anyway, it is limited to just these new machines with this new Qualcomm chipset, I believe. Like, there is no currently no x86 or whatever support, x64 support in there, right? So, but it sure seems like this is where they want to take Windows, and I don't know. I still feel like Windows 11, I've been using it for a while and it's fine, but it still feels like there's aspects of it that are actually degraded from prior Windows. They've just never fixed.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's just little things that it just feels like they're focusing on a lot of the wrong stuff. Sometimes you're like, what are you guys doing? Like,
well, my take on this before we talk about more gaming stuff and answer some supporter questions, my take on this is that Apple it works. The approach Apple has taken works because they're all in on Apple Silicon, right? The entire macOS ecosystem is based on Apple Silicon, but Windows is still going to be serving both x86, x64, and ARM. And I'm just curious as to how effective this new sort of approach for ARM can be if you're not phasing out x86 support,
which they can't
because there's a lot of implications here, and it does extend to gaming. So obviously, if you're putting out an Apple Silicon version of a game, it's compiled in ARM, right? What's going to happen on Windows? Are we going to be using that emulation layer forever, or will game developers ship ARM executables as well as x86 executables? I'm not sure how all of this is going to pan out at the moment. Is this actually a transition, or is it like a new market sector just for this style of mobile device? I'm not entirely sure what they're aiming to do there, but it certainly looks mobile-based to begin with. Right?
And let's be honest, the track record of Microsoft taking these sort of side turns isn't great in terms of long-term support and success. Yeah. And you're right, by not going all in, which they shouldn't, the chances of this working are indeed reduced compared to Apple. I'm sure they would love to go all in if they could like somehow turn the PC into this closed environment, but you can't put the genie back in the bottle, right? Windows is what it is, and it's too late. There's too many customers with too many broad use case scenarios that they can't become an Apple.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We got some supporter questions here. This one from Nua. Hi, people. Considering the recent push for ARM on Windows and how Qualcomm is pushing for gaming on the new Snapdragon X chips, do you think it would be possible in the future that it would be financially viable for ARM-based gaming laptops, considering people who buy gaming laptops mainly leave the charger on 24/7 and only care about performance? I'm not entirely sure about that. I think people have different needs. It's a bit of a generalized statement for an entire market segment. But it is interesting. I think it's pretty great that, when you buy an Apple laptop, you don't really get degraded performance at all by removing it from the mains, because, the power draw is within the ability of the battery to deliver that level of power. And when you've got like 175 watt Nvidia GPUs going into laptops, that just isn't possible. To answer the question, though, I do think it is financially viable for ARM-based gaming laptops, and you can bet your bottom dollar that Nvidia is going to be there. This is actually one thing that slightly concerns me about the Qualcomm X Elite. We've seen with Intel Arc that drivers are so important for good gaming performance. We've also seen with Intel Arc that it's taking them years to get their drivers into a performance state, particularly on legacy games. So I can well imagine that Qualcomm are going to be facing exactly the same sort of scenarios with their GPU driver. Something going back to that Baldur's Gate demo, let's go to Act 3, Baldur's Gate, the city, and see what it's performing like then, because that just annihilates CPU performance on a desktop. and on a console. So how it's going to do on a laptop based on ARM, I'm really interested to see. So yeah, I have actually put in a pre-order for a new Surface laptop specifically because I really want to test the gaming credentials, assuming Microsoft can't supply one, or one of the other partner businesses. I think one of the great things about this endeavor, though, is that a lot of companies are seemingly following Microsoft's lead. It's not just like the likes of Dell, it's, Asus, Acer, Lenovo. Everybody is producing Qualcomm X Elite based laptops. So that's quite exciting. There does seem to be a proper momentum towards it. Next question, Alexander Seidel. Will the work done for Proton/Wine over the last 30 years be transferable to a similar translation layer on ARM? Would an ARM Steam Deck/Steam Machine be interesting to Valve in the foreseeable future? I think there's possibly two separate things there, because Proton is basically transferring Windows over, Windows commands over to Linux. It's still x86 based at heart, so it's not quite the same thing. Let's go on to this question from Dajar Ko, which is actually quite interesting, ties back to what we were talking about earlier. Further details have emerged on Nvidia's AI PC SoC, as it is being called. Seems like it would be a range of SoCs with advanced packaging to bring together the ARM-based Cortex X5 Blackhawk CPU cores and the Blackwell RTX GPU cores, along with LPDDR6. Looks like Microsoft Prism will play a role, and presumably updates to Windows to enable the use of ARM CPUs to power their Copilot spec PCs and push them to clients. With Nvidia's share price just flying north of $1,000, previous news that it was going to be 3 nanometer would seem consistent with their bullish mood. Could this be the beginnings of the next Xbox and their handheld, or just a spicy Steam Deck destroyer? Well, I think the concept of Nvidia being able to compete again, in this particular market where they can't because they don't have an x86 license, they're going to be extremely interested in pursuing that. The gaming side of things, though, and of course, they have got the driver support, which Qualcomm may or may not have. So that's going to be hugely compelling. But it's all going to come down to how good Prism is and how performant those ARM cores are. And, the question is still, are games going to support native ARM executables or not? We just don't really know at the moment. Anything to add? Anybody? There's a lot going on here.
No.
No. Yeah, I think from a DF perspective, we really want to see what the Qualcomm X Elite can actually do. Maybe run some CPU tests, and try and get a handle on what overall sort of more holistic game support is across the generations of PC, across the various DXs and OpenGLs that we've seen. I'm really interested to see what it can do.